Welcome to Nifty 50 Photographers, and in today's video I'm going to do something a bit different. I'm going to show you how I process my photos in Lightroom. I'm going to work on an autumn shot and show you how you can really bring out those autumn colours and make your photo a lot more vibrant and interesting to look at. Now, if you're new to this channel, I'm Richard Gill. I'm a professional photographer, and on here I give tips and tricks on how you can take better photos. That sounds like something you're interested in, then please subscribe to the channel, and remember, hit that notification button, and then you'll get a little notification every time I release a new video. So let's head into Lightroom, and I'll show you the process I go through in developing my photos. Going to put my new glasses on. You like those? Right, here we go. So I've got this photograph here, and this is what it looked like after I developed it. And you can see it's brought out all the lush greens, the yellows of the leaves just turning colour. So let's go back to the original photo, and I'll show you the process I go through when I'm developing my shots. The first thing I would do is I actually pretty much start in the develop module, working my way down from top to bottom. But before I do anything, I always make sure that I've got this bit sorted out, any lens corrections. So I want the profile corrections ticked, and I'll usually remove chromatic aberration. Not usually a problem here, but it's picking up the lens I've got, and it's adjusting the photo to allow for any aberrations that you would get from that lens. So let's go back up to the top. Now, the first thing I do is choose a profile. Now, if I was doing commercial work and sending it to a client, I would leave this at a very standard one. I would choose either Adobe Color, or I might go to a camera matching profile. If you go over to here to this bank of icons, then you get all the possible profiles you can choose, and you can see there's Adobe Color, Landscape, Portrait, Standard, Vivid, and so on. Then you'll see there is another section of Adobe Raw profiles, then a section of camera matching ones, and then a chunk of different ones that it gives you, and it gives you a choice of artistic, modern, there's also some vintage ones, and so on. And now the ones I tend to like, I like the artistic and the modern section, so they're the ones I would normally dip into first. If you hover your mouse over one of the profiles, you can straight away see the effect it has on your photo. And usually one of my favorites is Artistic 4, so I'm going to have a look at that one. Yeah, that looks quite nice. And I'm also going to look in the modern section, because I quite like actually modern 4 on this. I usually like actually modern 7 and 8. 8 gives it very much a matte finish, and I think I'd rather have a glossier finish for this. So I'm going to go back to Artistic 4. I'm just going to check out the camera matching ones, because sometimes they work really well too, and I quite like the camera matching landscape one. It's a bit too rich in the sort of magentas for my taste for this photo. So right, let's settle on Artistic 4. So I've selected that one. You can alter the amount of the profile it applies to the picture, but I'm going to leave it today at 100. But if you change this slider, you'll see the effect it has, and you can dial in a number here. So I'll change that back to 100 and leave that as it is, and then hit the close icon. Now, the next thing I'm going to look at is the white balance. Now, usually the camera does a pretty good job of getting the white balance right, but I often want to change that a little bit. And today I'm going to look at, it was a cloudy day, so that's the first one I'm going to look at, and I expect this to make the scene probably just a little bit warmer, and that'll help to bring out some of the colors. Yeah, as you can see, it's quite a subtle change. If I do, that's before, that's after. So there's a subtle change there, but I do like the effect it's had, so I'm going to leave that at cloudy. Now, before I go much further, what's annoying me is I haven't taken this perfectly level, so I want to sort that out, because I'm going to find that irritating as I go through the process of editing the photo. So I'm going to choose now the crop tool. I'm going to pick constrain to image here, and what that means is when it does crop the frame, it'll keep it entirely within the image, so you won't get any white areas on the photo. And the first thing I'm going to do is sort out the level. So by using this angle tool, what I want is the water to be perfectly level, so I draw a line on the water like that, and that levels it up. And you can see here what I mean by constraint to image. It hasn't let this corner creep out of the size of the photo. Now I'm probably going to want to post this on Instagram. Now Instagram likes formats of 1:1, 4:5 and 16:9, and for this photo an obvious one would be 4:5. So I'm going to choose that ratio, and now I'm going to play around with the positioning of that. I want to bring a bit of sky in, so I'm going to move that up to the top. I'm happy with this being right across here because I want to bring in the colors of these trees here. Do I want to remove a little bit of my foreground here? I think I'm okay because this bit of tree is here on about the thirds. The Lightroom brings up a grid of the rule of thirds, and if you press the O key on your keyboard, you can get a number of different options, usually based around the rules. So things like golden triangle, which is that one. But I'm going to leave it on the rule of thirds because I'm happy with that for this photo. Now I'm happy with my crop, so I'll click done. So now I'm going to look at my exposure settings, and the first things I will do is probably reduce my highlights and put up my shadows. Now I'm using a Sony a7 III, has a really good sensor, it's very sensitive to low light, so I know I can boost my shadows right up. So I'm going to take them all the way up because that's going to bring up all the detail in the shadows, and I'm going to take my highlights most of the way down. In fact, I'll probably take them all the way down. Now the only drawback to that is I can now see there's a lot of dust spots that have been on my lens or sensor up here, but we'll deal with those in a moment. Now I'm going to play with my whites and blacks, and by pressing the option key on a Mac keyboard, you then get a black screen, and as you slide the white slider up, eventually it turns white on your screen, and I'm going to do it to the point where I just see a tiny bit of white appearing. And what that means is that's what would actually print white. So if I produce a hard copy print of that, anywhere those white areas are on your screen will print white. We'll do exactly the same with the blacks. Press my option key, and I do want some black in the print, so I'm going to settle for about 5% of my image coming black. That looks about right. Now already the scene looks a lot lighter and clearer, and so now I'm going to go back and look at my exposure and contrast. And looking at my histogram now, it's reasonably well balanced across the whole thing. I might reduce the exposure just very slightly, I think. Take it down because it looks as though the bright areas are just a bit too bright, so I'll take that down a tiny bit. And now I'm going to boost the contrast, and literally I play with these till I'm happy with what it looks like on the screen. I keep a little eye on the histogram at the same time, just make sure nothing's blown. These two little triangles up here, if you press on them, so the one on the left is showing you what's going on in the shadows, and any of these blue areas that are appearing, that's where the shadows are getting clipped. So probably could get away with boosting my exposure a little bit more. And on the other end of the scale, this is where your highlights are getting clipped, and it looks as though they're okay, just my shadows getting clipped a tiny bit, so I might just boost exposure just a fraction, and that's reduced. I'm not too worried actually because it's under the trees here, and we're not really losing any detail there. So next we move down to the next section, and I don't know whether I need much texture in here, but I will just boost it a little bit because I want this, it'll help to define the trees a little bit. Clarity I will probably leave alone, because if I do a global clarity adjustment, then it's going to affect the whole photo, and it's going to do things like emphasize those dust spots in my sky. So it'll also make the photo a little bit lighter, which I probably won't want to do at this stage. What I will do is add a tiny little bit of dehaze, because that helps to just bring out a little bit of detail in the sky. It'll also emphasize those dust spots, so I'm going to keep it a very small amount, just +10, somewhere around there. Actually, I'm going to settle on around +10, 11, something like that. So that looks okay. Then I'm going to look at my vibrance and saturation. Now, I tend to push my vibrance up more. I like my photos to be bright and colourful. It's a personal choice. It might not be fully realistic, but I like them to be just a bit more colourful, so I'm going to push that up to about +30. My saturation, I'm just going to do that much more subtly, probably something around there. Looks good, around 9 or 10. So I'm getting to be reasonably happy with that. Then I'm going to change my my curve here, and you can play around with this curve to your heart's content, but I'm just going to choose a medium contrast curve because I know that works well for this kind of shot. And then I'm going to look at the hue, saturation and luminance. Now, normally I don't really change the hue because that's going to dramatically alter the color of things, but I will play around with saturation and luminance, and I'm going to start actually back to front. So I'm going to start with luminance, and I'm going to use this little tool over here because it's certain colors where I want to change the luminance. So I'm going to pick up that tool, take it onto my photo, and as you press your left mouse button and slide it up and down, you can see it changes the luminance of the colors you pick. So I want to just take out a bit of luminance of these sort of yellows, because I think they're a bit over bright and you're not seeing the true color of them. And same with some of these oranges. I'm going to just play with those a little bit. Okay, I'm happy with that. This water here looks a little bit on the blue side, so I'm going to try and just bring that up a tiny bit, make that a little bit brighter. So I think the sky was cloudy white rather than very blue. And now I'm going to move on to saturation, and I want to improve the saturation, particularly in these oranges in the trees. So I'm going to just boost that just a fraction too. And most of these changes I would do are fairly subtle, because I don't want to dramatically alter the scene. I still want it to look fairly real. And okay, I'm happy with that. So that's gone +7 and +2. Now I'm going to have a look at the whole toning of the shot, and I work with these 3 circles. So I pick up the circle in the middle, and I bring it out to about halfway around, and I literally go round the circle and see what effect I think I would like. Now this here is the midtones, and so the midtones to me in this photo are the greeny yellow colors. So I'll aim for that area of the circle, and I'll just, as you can slide this in and out, and that alters the amount. So I'm going to make it fairly small, close to the center. Now I'm going to do the shadows. Now the shadows are darks here, so to my mind they're sort of blues and greens in this picture, and I'm going to do the same sort of thing with that. I'm going to make them slightly bluer, and again make it quite subtle. Okay, so I'm quite happy somewhere around there. And then the highlights are the yellows and the oranges, so I'll do the same with that, and I'm going to pick a section on this curve that's oranges and yellows and bring them up, and I might bring them up a little bit more somewhere around there. So now it's happy, and I usually don't really play with the blending other than just to see if sliding it up and down to the extremes is making any difference, and not really, and the balance of it. I'm going to push the balance a little bit towards the highlights. Now sharpening. So I took this at ISO 50, so I know my sensor is pretty sharp there, so I'm going to take that right up to 90. And my rule is to set the sharpening to 90, and the noise reduction are now set to 10, so that noise reduction and sharpening add up to 100. And then I'm going to bring the detail up to around about 50. Again, if you press your Option key, you can see the amount of detail you're getting there on the sharpening to about 50. Happy with that. And then I'm going to bring on some masking. Again, press your Option key and you'll see where it's applying that sharpening to. And I don't want it done particularly to the clouds of water, it's really just the tree outlines. I'm going to take it quite a long way up actually on this photo. 68 there, happy with that. The rest of these I'm going to ignore. I'm going to ignore this upright because I've already dealt with that, but that's another way you could do it. If you click on auto, it'll automatically level your photo. You can see it hasn't really made much difference to mine, so we'll take that off. Actually put that back on, it's going to take it off. It's okay, that looks better. And then I'm going to put in a vignette, and I always prefer a slightly dark one, so I'm going to do one about -10. And now I need to deal with those spots in the sky before I do some final sort of dodging and burning. Now, the best way to deal with the spots in the sky, and it doesn't always work brilliantly in Lightroom, but it's usually pretty good, is the spot removal tool, which is this one up here. And if you click on this little button, visualize spots, it will show you where they are, and you can alter the amount that it shows by using this slider, and it'll make them actually more obvious or not. So and now we can just simply now if you want to make this tool bigger or smaller, you use the square bracket keys on your keyboard, and what you've got to watch is it doesn't pick up a bit of sky where there's another spot. And as I haven't got a lot of sky to play with, that's going to be a problem here. So we just go through, taking all those out, and I actually might take this visualize tool off just to see what's going on better. And I'm going to zoom in, so Command and plus on the keyboard helps you to zoom in. I got them all okay. So one way to also to spot is if you bring up your dehaze amount, you'll see if you've got any more spots in that sky, and I think I've got rid of most of them. There's just odd one that I want to just go back and eliminate here. Okay, happy I've got all those now, and now I'm going to slide my dehaze back to something sensible like 9 or 10. Okay, that looks okay. So fill the screen again. Now I want to just emphasize some aspects of the photo just to make it more interesting to look at, to take the viewer's eye round the picture. I'm going to do that with the brush tool, and this is called dodging and burning. And in the old days you would have allowed more light or less light onto the area of the photo. And if you think this is cheating, you should really take a look at the work of Ansel Adams's landscape, one of the most famous landscape photographers, and he did a lot of dodging and burning. He had all these little cutouts that he would put over his negatives when he was working in the darkroom. So I'm going to start by bringing some up. So I've got my brush tool. If you double click on effect, it'll take all the sliders back to 0. And one of the things you want to set up, so I'm going to set my density to 100. I'm setting my flow also up high. The feather, I want that to be quite big because I want it to blend subtly in there. And the size, I'm going to do that on my keyboard because of the areas I'm going to play with. So I'm going to start with this tree in the foreground, and I'm just going to lighten that up a little bit. So I'm going to boost the exposure by about, let's say, by about 0.3, 0.4, and I'm going to boost the clarity just a little bit by about 20. And we're just going to paint over that tree, and you can see how it comes lighter as I do that. I'm not going to paint over the whole tree, I'm just going to miss a little bit of there that would naturally have been in the shadow. So the sun is coming in from the right hand side of the photo as you look at it. And you can now play with the sliders. I think I've done that slightly too much, so I'm going to bring that clarity down. I'm going to bring the exposure down a little bit too. Now I want to bring out these oranges in the trees as well, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller. I'm going to leave the sliders the same and just paint over those. So I'll paint over this area here, and if you click on this button, the mask, you can see where the brush is going as well. So a little bit there, a bit these trees here, this one down here, over here, just anywhere where I'm seeing yellow, and it'll just, okay, take the mask off, and you can see how it's brought those up. Actually, I'm going to tone that back a tiny bit. Okay, I'm happy with that now. Now I'm going to do a new brush, so I want to play with some of these greens, but I'm probably going to take them just down a bit. So I'm going to take the exposure down, take the clarity down, and just paint some of those in a wee bit darker. Not all of them, just areas where I think I want to bring out a little bit of contrast against my yellows. So here it just looks a bit better there, a bit on this one, and you can just play around with this, see if you like the look. If you don't like it, what you've done, if you make sure you've selected the particular brush you've done, and you just press your backspace and it'll delete it. So right now I need to put that back in again. Right, so there, happy with that now. Now the other thing I want to do is I want to do something in this water. So I'm going to do another brush here. I'm going to boost the exposure a little bit. I'm going to take the clarity down because I don't want to make it sharper. I just want to make it a bit lighter. So this area that was light in the photo, I'm just going to up that. And you see how it's got that tree there? Didn't really want it to do that. So if I go to the range mask here and pick luminance, and now drag this slider up, I can get it to go behind the tree. So bringing it up now, there we go, to about 70. Now it's applied that behind the tree and not so much on that tree trunk. And I'm going to do a bit in this foreground here, where we've got this reflection of this little island. So now I've got some little highlights in my scene, and I can check whether I feel I'm quite happy with it. And okay. All right, so that's something close. Now one other area you could dramatically change your colors is in this calibration section at the bottom, and if you start playing with these, you'll see what happens. So if I change the reds, take the reds right to the yellow bit, it turns the whole picture red, yellow. Take it the other way, you'll see it gets much more green. And I might just try toning them down, and just toning them down, but increasing the saturation slightly. Now red, green and blue all work together, so you'll see that now that it has big effect on the green. The fact that I've taken some red out, if I push the green right up, it'll go quite blue. And I'm going to take that slightly down that way and just reduce the saturation a little bit. And finally the blues, and you can see by boosting the blues it really pumps the greens. So I'm going to just do that very subtly and bring up the saturation in those very slightly. And I think I'm reasonably happy with that. So that's the kind of process I would go through with editing, and tell you can play around with it. The beauty of Lightroom is that nothing is destructive, so you can reset it all. If I show you what the photo was like before, pretty dull and flat, now afterwards you've really got those autumn colors. And if I'm brutally honest, I'm not 100% happy with that. I'd probably play around with that more, but it's just going to make the video more boring watching me play around with a few sliders to get it just as I want. So I hope you have enjoyed that. If you have, please do give it a like, and make sure you come back and watch the next video. And if there's any topics you'd like me to cover with Lightroom or how to take better photos, please leave a comment below. I'll look forward to seeing you next time.